"Get inside, before it's too late," the rancher ordered, his voice cutting through the desert wind like a blade. She stared at him, trembling, her sun-bleached dress clinging to her thin frame. Blood dotted the fabric near her shoulder, fresh enough to still glisten in the dying light. Jacob Henley had seen plenty of desperate souls wander onto his land, but none like this. The woman couldn't be more than 20, with wild auburn hair and eyes that held secrets darker than the approaching storm clouds. She clutched a leather satchel against her chest like it contained her very soul. "I don't know you," she whispered, backing toward his porch steps. "I don't know anyone anymore." Behind her, dust clouds rose on the horizon, riders moving fast. Jacob's weathered hands tightened on his rifle. 30 years of ranching in this god-forsaken corner of Arizona had taught him to read danger like scripture, and everything about this moment screamed trouble. "Name's Jacob," he said, keeping his voice steady. "And those men following you ain't coming for Sunday dinner." She glanced back at the approaching dust, then at him. Her trembling intensified. "They killed my father. They killed everyone in Broken Creek." Her voice cracked on the words. "I'm the only one who knows what they did." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and something else. Smoke. Jacob's jaw tightened. Broken Creek was 2 days' ride south. If it was gone, truly gone, then these weren't ordinary outlaws chasing her. These were the kind of men who left no witnesses, no stories to tell. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the riders. 6 of them, maybe 7, their horses lathered with foam. They'd been riding hard, riding with purpose. "Ma'am," Jacob said, stepping aside and gesturing toward his cabin door, "I don't know what you are carrying in that bag, and I don't much care, but if you we. And to live to see tomorrow, you best decide right now whether you trust a stranger more than you fear what's coming." She looked at the satchel, then at his face. Something in his eyes, maybe the same haunted recognition that lived in her own, made her decision. She ran up the steps and through the door just as the first drops of rain began to fall. Jacob followed, barring the door behind them. Through the window, the riders were closer now, close enough to see the glint of steel and the hard set of their faces. Whatever she was running from had just found her. "What's in the bag?" Jacob asked, lighting an oil lamp as darkness swallowed his cabin whole. The woman, she still hadn't given her name, sat hunched in his wooden chair, the satchel pressed against her like armor. "Evidence," she said finally. "Letters, documents, proof of what they did to my town." Jacob poured coffee from the pot on his stove, the bitter smell mixing with the tension in the air. "What kind of proof?" She opened the satchel with shaking hands, revealing a stack of papers covered in official seals and signatures. "The railroad company. They wanted our land for the new line, but the town council voted no. So they hired those men to make sure there wouldn't be anyone left to object." Jacob's blood ran cold. He'd heard rumors of such things, entire communities disappearing overnight, their deaths blamed on Apache raids or cholera outbreaks. But seeing the proof, the cold calculation of it written in corporate letterhead, made his stomach turn. "How many dead?" he asked quietly. 43 souls. Tears carved tracks down her dust-covered cheeks. "They came at dawn, shot anyone who tried to run, burned the rest alive in the church." She clutched a particular document, her knuckles white. "I only escaped because I was in the hills collecting herbs for my father's medicine." Through the window, Jacob could see torches moving in the distance. The riders had stopped, probably making camp, waiting for daylight to search properly. They knew she was close. "Why bring it here?" Jacob asked. "Why not ride for the territorial capital? Get these to the governor?" Her laugh was bitter as desert sand. "Because the governor's signature is on half these papers. The railroad owns them all. Judges, marshals, politicians. There's nowhere to run where their money can't reach." Jacob stared at the documents, understanding the weight of what she carried. This wasn't just evidence of murder. It was proof of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of territorial government. Anyone who tried to expose it would be signing their own death warrant. "So, what's your plan?" he asked. She looked up at him, her green eyes fierce despite her fear. "There's a newspaper man in Denver, Thomas Mackenzie. He's been investigating the railroad for months. If I can get these to him—" "That's 8 days hard riding through Apache country," Jacob interrupted. "And those men out there know every trail between here and Colorado." "Then I'll die trying," she said simply. "My father died believing someone would tell the truth about what happened. I won't let that die with him." Jacob walked to his window, watching the distant fires. 6 armed men against one rancher and a terrified young woman. The smart play was obvious. Hand her over, claim the reward money, and forget this ever happened. But then he thought about Broken Creek, about 43 people who'd trusted in justice and died for it. Outside, a horse whinnied in the darkness, closer than before. The first shot shattered Jacob's kitchen window at dawn. "They found us," the woman, who had finally told him her name was Sarah Manifest, whispered from behind his overturned table. Glass crunched under their feet as Jacob grabbed his Winchester and extra ammunition. "Miss Manifest!" a voice called from outside, smooth as snake oil. "We know you're in there. Send out the lady and the bag, and we'll let the rancher live." Jacob peered through a gowm in his shutters. 7 men had his cabin surrounded, their rifles trained on every door and window. Their leader sat easy in his saddle, a tall man in a black duster with silver conchos, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. "That's Wade Brennan," Sarah breathed, "the railroad's main enforcer. He's the one who gave the orders in Broken Creek." Brennan's voice carried clearly in the still morning air. "You've got 1 minute to decide, rancher. The lady dies either way, but we might let you walk away from this." Jacob checked his rifle. 30 rounds, maybe 40 if he rationed his shots. Against 7 professional killers, it wasn't nearly enough. But Sarah was right about one thing. If these documents died with her, 43 murders would go unpunished, and countless other towns would follow. "There's a root cellar," Jacob whispered, nodding toward a trapdoor hidden beneath his kitchen rug. "Tunnel leads to the barn. You might could make it to my horse." "No," Sarah said firmly. "I won't run anymore. If we're going to die, let's die fighting." Another shot punched through his front door, splintering the wood. Brennan's patience was running thin. "Time's up, rancher!" Jacob rose from cover and fired, his bullet catching one of Brennan's men in the shoulder. The man screamed and toppled from his horse as the others opened up, filling the cabin with lead and splinters. Sarah grabbed Jacob's old Colt .45 from the mantelpiece, checking the cylinder with practiced hands. "My father taught me to shoot," she said, answering his surprised look. "They fought like demons trapped in hell, trading shot for shot with men who killed for money." Jacob's coffee pot exploded in a shower of tin and steam. His family Bible, the one his mother had carried west in a covered wagon, disintegrated in a hail of bullets. But for every shot they fired, Brennan's men fired 10. The cabin walls were Swiss cheese, the roof leaked daylight through bullet holes, and Jacob's ammunition was running dangerously low. "The barn's on fire," Sarah said, pointing through the back window. Smoke billowed from the structure where Jacob's horse was trapped, cutting off their only escape route. Brennan's laughter echoed across the yard. "No place left to run, folks. Come out now, or we'll burn you out like we did those church mice in Broken Creek." Jacob looked at Sarah, saw his own grim determination reflected in her eyes. They were down to their last few bullets, trapped in a burning cabin with nowhere to go. Outside, Brennan was reloading his rifle, taking his time now that victory was certain. It was then that Sarah noticed something that changed everything. "Look," Sarah whispered, pointing through a bullet hole in the wall. Jacob squinted through the gap and his breath caught. There, carved into the silver conchos on Brennan's duster, was a symbol he recognized. A distinctive railroad company insignia, but modified with an additional mark. A small cross, scratched hastily into the metal. "That's my father's work," Sarah breathed. "He was the town silversmith. Brennan came to him months ago, wanted those conchos repaired. Father always marked his work with that tiny cross, said every piece of beauty deserved God's blessing." Jacob stared at her, understanding flooding through him like cold water. "Your father worked on the gun that killed him." Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He trusted them. When Brennan came with stories about protecting the town from Apache raids, Father believed him. We all did." She clutched the leather satchel tighter. "That's why this matters so much. They didn't just murder us, they made us accomplices in our own destruction." Outside, Brennan called out again. "Last chance, Miss Manifest. Walk out, no. We'll with that bag, and I promise you a quick death." Jacob's mind raced. 7 men, 2 bullets left in his Winchester, and Sarah had maybe 3 shots in the Colt. But something about her father's mark on those conchos sparked an idea. Desperate, probably suicidal, but an idea nonetheless. "That tunnel to the barn," Jacob said quietly. "It doesn't just go to the barn. It connects to an old mine shaft my brother dug before he died. Comes up near the creek, about 200 yards north." Sarah's eyes widened. "You could escape, No, Jacob interrupted. We could escape, but only if one of us keeps them busy long enough for the other to make it through. They stared at each other, both understanding what he wasn't saying. Someone had to stay behind. Someone had to die. Sarah started to speak, but Jacob held up his hand. From outside came a new sound, hoofbeats, but different from the ones they had been hearing. These were coming from the east, moving fast. "Riders approaching!" one of Brennan's men shouted. Jacob risked a look through his front window and felt his heart jump. 3 men in territorial marshal badges were cresting the hill, their horses lathered with sweat. Real lawmen, not railroad bought and paid for thugs. But Brennan saw them too. His face went hard as winter stone. "Kill the witnesses," he barked to his men. "All of them. Make it look like a range war gone bad." The game had changed again. Now it wasn't just about the documents or Sarah's life. It was about whether justice had any chance at all in this God-forsaken territory. Jacob looked at Sarah, saw her father's determination in her green eyes, and made his choice. "When the shooting starts," he whispered, pressing the satchel into her hands, "you run for that tunnel. Don't stop, don't look back, and don't let them die for nothing." The sound of cocking rifles filled the air like deadly rain. The territorial marshals never stood a chance. Brennan's men cut them down in a crossfire that echoed across the desert like thunder, their badges glinting uselessly in the morning sun. But their arrival had given Jacob the distraction he needed. As Brennan's attention focused on the new threat, Jacob kicked open his back door and charged into the yard, Winchester blazing. His first shot took down the man guarding the rear of the cabin. His second shattered the leg of another, sending him screaming to the ground. By the time Brennan's men realized what was happening, Jacob was already diving behind his water trough, drawing their fire away from the cabin and away from Sarah. "The rancher!" Brennan roared. "Kill him now!" Bullets chewed the wooden trough to splinters, but Jacob had bought precious seconds. Through the chaos, he saw Sarah sprint from the cabin toward the concealed tunnel entrance, the leather satchel clutched against her chest like a shield. She almost made it. Brennan's rifle cracked, and Sarah stumbled, blood blooming across her shoulder. But she didn't fall. Instead, she spun and fired the Colt with her good arm, her bullet punching through Brennan's hat and making him dive for cover. "The tunnel!" Jacob shouted, emptying his last rounds to keep Brennan's head down. Sarah reached the hidden entrance and vanished underground just as Jacob's ammunition ran out. For a moment, the desert fell silent except for the crackle of flames from the burning barn and the moans of wounded men. Brennan rose from cover, his face twisted with rage. "Search every inch of this place. Find that tunnel. Find her." But it was too late. By the time Brennan's surviving men located the mine shaft entrance, Sarah was already emerging near the creek, 200 yards away. Jacob watched through the smoke as she caught one of the marshal's horses, a strong bay that had survived the ambush, and pulled herself into the saddle despite her wounded shoulder. Brennan saw her too. He raised his rifle, drew careful aim across the distance, and fired. The bullet went wide. Sarah Manifest rode hard for the northern hills, the satchel secured in her saddlebags, carrying the truth about Broken Creek toward whatever justice might still exist in the world. Jacob smiled grimly and stepped out from behind the ruined water trough, his hands raised in surrender. Brennan's remaining men, only 3 now, surrounded him with their guns drawn. "Where's she heading?" Brennan demanded, his silver conchos catching the light. Jacob looked at those conchos, thought about Sarah's father blessing them with his tiny cross, and felt something like peace settle over him. "Reckon that's between her and God now." Brennan's face went purple with fury. He raised his pistol, finger tightening on the trigger. The shot, when it came, echoed across the desert like judgment itself. 3 months later, the Denver Post ran a front-page story that brought down a territorial governor, disbanded a corrupt railroad company, and sent 7 men to federal prison for mass murder. The byline read, "Thomas Mackenzie," but everyone who mattered knew the real author. Sarah Manifest testified before a federal tribunal, her shoulder healed, but her voice still carrying the weight of 43 lost souls. The documents she'd carried through fire and blood became evidence in the largest corporate corruption case in territorial history. Jacob Henley was buried in the cemetery behind his burned cabin, his grave marked by a simple wooden cross. Sarah visited once, leaving wildflowers and a small silver medallion, her father's work, beside the headstone. On quiet evenings, when the desert wind carries voices from the past, Some say you can still hear the echo of his last words to Brennan. Reckon that's between her and God now. Justice, it turns out, sometimes rides a wounded horse toward an uncertain dawn, but it rides nonetheless. The camera pulls back across the vast desert, showing Sarah's horse disappearing into the rising sun, carrying truth towards tomorrow, like a promise the land itself refuses to break. Fade to black. Stories like this aren't just told, they're felt. If you felt it too, subscribe and stay with us.